Alright, so good day class. So today we're going to discuss our key concept would be about construction projects. This is part 1 and another part followed by another part 2. So let's read. So PD 6079-4 Project Management Part 4, the UK British Standards Institute's Guides to Project Management in the Construction Industry provides a summary of the characteristics of construction projects which contextualizes project management to construction. So it's from the British Standards Institute or BSI in 2006. So key characteristics are diversity of clients, types of projects, project objectives, diversity of project participants or stakeholders, and disciplines involved, site location factors, regulatory requirements, industry custom and practice, technology, people, organizational structures, management, quality, and work location. So, in terms of construction project management, one of the most influential characteristics is the role that custom and practice has traditionally played. Projects have commonly adopted practices that have been used on previous projects without questioning whether the management organizations, systems, and people that were utilized in the past are appropriate for the present. So this inherent conservativeness and reliance on custom and practice can greatly hinder the application of effective and efficient project management approaches and innovative ways of managing construction activities. So this is not only true class to the British or to Europe, but it's also true here in the Philippines, when we have traditions already in construction. Okay? So if unless we break those some of those bad traditions, then we could never truly implement uh, more innovative ways in managing construction projects. So the fact that there are unique characteristics in construction projects that make them different to other project environments is reflected in the development of construction industry. Specific guide and standards for their management, such as PD 6079-4, likewise was the Project Management Institute or PMI, state that much of the content of the PM book or project management body of knowledge applies to construction projects. They argue that the broadening of project management concepts and practices across the global industry warrants the development of a construction industry extension to the guide. So the latest version of the extension is the construction extension to the project management body of knowledge guide 3rd edition, which is in 2007. So in terms of the unique characteristics of construction project, the extension explains how projects inherently contain a high degree of risk in projecting time and cost, with each building representing challenges to accurately project and control time and cost. So if you have the time class, so I advise that you secure a copy of the project management body of knowledge. You'll really learn a lot class from what's written there. Aside from that, if you're already familiar with it, you could also try to take a further lesson so that you can take the project management professional examination. Then such projects also require intricate interfaces with technology licensors, adjusting construction techniques to suit the technology transfer process, which result in unique subcontracting arrangements, extension to schedules, and increased capital cost. So there are also unique issues relating to geography and site conditions, and the projects often require large amount of materials and physical equipment to move these materials. Regulations often require a team of specialists from different companies and different construction disciplines. Finally, such projects involve a diverse range of stakeholders, all with varying expectations that many other types of projects do not have. Example are stakeholders including public taxpayers, regulatory agencies, governments, and environmental and community groups. Then the next subtopic would be engaging and managing stakeholders on construction project. So one topic that has gained increased attention and traction in both project management theory and practice is that of how to manage stakeholders and engage with them. So the UK Office of Government Commerce or OGC define the key stakeholders that make up the project team under three broad categories. So we have the client team, which is the client, project sponsor, and support. Okay, for example, the independent client advisors. Then the managed by, which is the project sponsor and project manager. Then the supply team, which is your integrated supply chain of consultants, constructors, specialists, suppliers, and facilities managers. So a project management organization needs to recognize that project success is a multi-dimensional construct and will be achieved if the key stakeholders are happy with both outcome and process in whatever ways those two concepts are defined. So it's really important as if to what you call this to link project success also with also the satisfaction of your stakeholders or your client. Okay. Here, terminology is fluid with the term stakeholder management and stakeholder engagement often used interchangeably. There is, however, a subtle distinction between the two. Some stakeholders, such as the project team members and subcontractors, can and need to be managed. Others, such as local communities, may not be directly managed but can and need to be engaged with on certain projects. So in terms of the nature of the process for engaging with or in some instances managing the project stakeholders, most models are based on cyclical and iterative process with the following activities. So first, they have identifying the stakeholders, analyzing each stakeholder in terms of their likely behavior toward the project, prioritizing the stakeholders, developing a strategy for engagement or management, predicting the likely behavior from strategy, then implementing the strategy as it is a dynamic environment, repeating the process also. So a key factor outlined by the BSI is that construction is particularly characterized by diversity of clients and other project participants. Example, the stakeholders. So the topic of construction clients will be covered in the subsequent week session. So in the remainder of this week, we focus on the project participants, henceforth referred to as stakeholders. Construction project stakeholders are those participants as well as the client that are actively involved in the projects or whose interest may be positively or negatively affected by the execution or the completion of the project. So the wide diversity of stakeholders with different expectations and perceptions of a construction project in part reflects the fact that whilst projects create value, so are of interest to those recipients of value from the private and public sector. They can also destroy value or be perceived as not delivering value. For example, the construction process can create noise, dust, and dangerous sites for children, change landscapes, degrade the natural resources of the planet, and diverse scarce capital from other opportunities. Hence, stakeholders such as governments, environmental groups, and community groups might not share the view of investors and developers that a particular project is worth doing. So the growing attention being paid to the views of stakeholders also reflects a reconceptualizing of the notion of value. For example, the recognition that the value of construction needs to be seen from the perspective of sustainability. Okay? So most construction projects class, um, it should be seen in the context of sustainability because the our planet it has finite resources. So we have to manage these resources well. So when we do our construction projects, we must consider if the design in such a way that it should not harm the environment also, and it should be beneficial to the community. And consider the urban and construction process or the UDCP. UDCP is complex and involves stakeholders from different areas and disciplines. So given that the UDCP has both a short-term and long-term significance for communities, businesses, and the wider society, there needs to be a consideration of sustainability. failure to identify, engage, or manage all stakeholders involved with and affected by the UDCP can have a severe negative impact on the ability to develop sustainably. So the presence of stakeholders with negative attitudes towards a construction project can be severely detrimental to its implementation, resulting in negative outcomes such as cost and schedule overruns. Olander and Landin in 2005 undertook a case study of two projects to explore the problems that arise from having obstructive stakeholders, how the problems were resolved, and what were the consequences of the solutions implemented. The first project studied was a housing project comprising of 60 apartments in the city of Lund, Sweden. So the second project was the construction of a railroad track through the town center in the same city. The authors provide a narrative of the progress of each of the projects. As part of the narrative, they identify the stakeholders into the project and analyze each stakeholder's power and interest. Importantly, they also track how power and interest for some stakeholders change over time. During this, they demonstrate how stakeholders with high power or interest obstructed or opposed some aspect of the project and consequences of their action. Whilst the authors focus on cases in one country, Sweden, the need to deal with such potentially obstructive stakeholders is a common problem facing those working in the construction industry, regardless of the country context. So the main tool that the authors use to analyze the stakeholder is the power interest matrix, which was originally developed in the field of strategic management by Johnson and Scholes in 1999 and has been widely applied in other country contexts besides Sweden, including the US and the UK. So the key solution identified in the paper could be called a model to stakeholder engagement process that requires the project management team to identify those stakeholders who can affect the project and then manage their differing demands through good communication in the early stages of the project. Whilst much of the focus from the stakeholder engagement process documented in the paper is on the mitigation of negative consequences such as time delays, it is worth noting that there are instances of positive outcomes. For example, in the housing project, the developer believed that engagement with the majority of the stakeholders after the original proposal had been developed resulted in a revised final design that was better than the original one. So the authors conclude with four major lessons for project managers, okay, which is investigate all possible alternatives and solutions in terms of potential influence from stakeholders, set out both the positive and negative arguments for an alternative to gain the trust from stakeholders that are negatively affected, update the stakeholders analysis throughout the project lifecycle, and analyze the effect of any decisions on the different stakeholders at key points in the project. And then be proactive in undertaking the stakeholder engagement process. So whilst these lessons are derived from a case study in Sweden, they are applicable to the UK and other countries. As all construction projects have potentially obstructive stakeholders that need to be engaged with and or managed. So one of the challenges in ensuring the stakeholder engagement or management process is carried out effectively lies in analyzing the impact on behavior that arises from the fact that construction projects involve complex stakeholder relationship networks. Yang et al. In 2011 addressed this challenge by applying social network analysis for analyzing stakeholders' influence. They apply SNA to the example of the construction of new classrooms and facilities for a school in Australia. The authors compared the results from the social network analysis with the results from applying a more traditional approach, which is the Bourne's stakeholder circle technique, and conclude that the SNA was effective in establishing a prioritized ranking of stakeholders. Yang also provided a list of 15 critical success factors contributing to the success of a stakeholder management in construction derived from prior literature and validated through interviews with professionals working in Hong Kong. Of this, the highest ranked CSF in terms of perceived importance is managing stakeholders with social responsibility, from the economic, legal, environmental, and ethical, followed by exploring stakeholders' needs to projects, communicating with and engaging stakeholders properly, and frequently and understanding area of stakeholder interest area, and properly identifying stakeholders respectively. So these top 5 CSF or critical success factors reflect the fact that stakeholders need be considered throughout the construction, and they need to be identified at the very start of the process and communicated with or engaged with throughout the project lifecycle. So the authors follow up this analysis with the collection of data from the interviewees as to the most effective stakeholder management methods. So they link the methods to 5 high-level purposes of stakeholder management. Which the first is identifying stakeholders. Second, gathering information from the stakeholders. Third, estimating stakeholders. Fourth, making decisions. Fifth, implementing decisions. So for the importance of communication, a common thread linking the disparate, how do you read this? Disparate themes relating to stakeholder management and engagement is the importance of communication. So in short, but instructive video on the topic of aligning the priorities of stakeholders, Graham Fairley, head of Facade Engineering AECOM, a global company with a presence in over 150 countries and listed in the Fortune 500 as one of America's largest companies, discusses the need for strong communication and effective flow of information between two key stakeholders, which are the client and the builders. The point is made that to ensure the right level of quality is achieved, this communication and information flow needs to start before a project goes into production. So, topics for communication and information include new regulations, planning permission, budgets, and team relationships. So, you can view the link here, class, in YouTube. So, I'm going to post our key concept in our class Facebook group, okay, so for you to read. Okay, class, so I think the highlight of this one is that communication is really important. So even if you're just doing a single story residential building, you need to constantly update the client of the progress of the work. Always to make them feel secure also that the project that they want to engage with you is progressing. Okay. So communication task is really important, not only in construction but in life also. So you need to communicate with your loved ones. You need to communicate with other people uh, as well. Okay, so if you have any further questions or clarifications, class, feel free to contact me anytime in our Facebook group or send a chat or send an email. Okay, so stay safe and see you next meeting.